Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 180. And so we've got Jack, Adam, and Gary all in the same room. And that's Jack right back there. Right there. No, that's not him. Jack's on his way. He's in traffic somewhere. And so he said, hey, I'm sorry, I'm running late. So we'll have to wait on the dad jokes. I was in a waiting room. I had to have emergency eye surgery yesterday, so everything's a little foggy. But this lady, and I was in the waiting room for about 4 hours. And this one lady, she's 79 years old, and she was just rattling off jokes. And I thought, where is Jack to be taken? I should have been taking notes because she had a whole bunch of dad jokes. So anyway, Jack will be coming on. Anybody that's on here, you know the drill. Hit us up with Q&A on questions. We are going to go deeper into what we started last week, where Adam, you did a white paper on the 7 deadly sins of how the things that we need to be ignoring or dealing with in order to have a triple top line, or triple the value of our company. That's the bottom line. But we only got through 3.5.
Yep. That's right.
So oh yeah, man, thanks, Will. Appreciate that. That's exactly what I was dealing with, torn retina. So before we go into those things, and we'll do a little recap on the first 3.5, anybody that missed that, and then we'll deal with the last 3.5. Did you hear about the restaurant on the moon? Great food, no atmosphere.
That's terrible.
You have just, you might have a job with us because if Jack can't make it because of traffic on his mountain bike out in the wilderness somewhere, we'll be calling you. So anyway, what about current events? Because we do have some current events and continued dysfunction. It's like that would be an entire rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, thank you. So let's not go down it, because I've got nothing. Nothing to say about that. What I would say is that we are continuing to see a little bit more slowdown. Not real bad though. So in other words, I haven't with the lone exception of the freight company, I haven't heard the people that I've talked to that have had slowdown, primarily in construction. They're not like the sky's falling. It was more like, well, actually this is kind of helpful, man. We needed a breather in some respects. So it's but it does mean that, hey, continue to prepare. And then hopefully we, when that happens, we might see some interest rates start to come back down a little bit. But that's really the only new item that I've seen as I've continued with our planning meetings with our clients. I always ask them, hey, you seen any signs? Like, how you feeling about 2020? It's like our own informal CEO confidence survey. How you feeling about 2024? And so far the data back has been fairly solid with some. Before it used to be, well, I'm nervous about a slowdown, but I haven't seen it. And now people are saying we're starting to see a slowdown, but it's not bad, and it still seems like it's isolated primarily to the construction space, and then shipping and freight, which are leading indicators.
Yeah, anything tied to those high interest rates is being affected, that's for sure. Yeah, I think that's, we actually ought to start doing because I would trust that, just given our clientele, probably more than some of the other data that is coming out of Washington or wherever.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I don't really trust anything that's coming out of Washington, period. But anyway, so let's do a quick recap of the first 3.5 5 things that we talked about. Poor financial records, number 1. What's the issue with that?
How am I supposed to believe you, Gary, if you can't prove it in your financial records? In other words, like, what do you think due diligence is? when I'm looking to buy your company, it's poring over your financial records, looking to make sure that what you represented is actually true. So if you have crappy ones, I don't believe you. And if I can't believe you, why would I pay you a premium?
So that's number 1. Number 2, you don't actually own the rights to something, intellectual property. What's the issue there?
Gary, I know that you said that you've got all these great, customer relationships and supplier relationships that go back years. They're never going to change. Total loyalty, and what we do is totally, unique. Nobody could ever replicate it. But you don't have any contracts. Everything's a handshake deal. By the way, when I did a quick IP search, you don't actually, have any that's trademarked or patented or whatever. And in fact, somebody else has some applications pending. Again, it's kind of goes back to, it's hard for me to give you a premium then when I don't have protection that the thing that I'm valuing is actually going to be there after you're gone.
Yeah. And I think some people last week got a little hung up on the IP part. However, what I would say is if you don't have contracts documented, I was certainly involved in a turnaround of a manufacturing company, and we didn't have contracts. We didn't have contracts with 80% of our population or our clients. Oh, Jack has made it through traffic, but that's an issue. That's an issue. Nobody's going to pay well for that. So, Jack, so good to have you back here, buddy.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, hold on.
Battery 100%.
I think that's the issue.
Is
Hold
it
on.
me?
For some reason, my Bose speaker was not working.
How about now?
Can you say something, Jack?
How about now?
Yeah, I'm not hearing you.
Check, baby. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Oh, gosh, that's just so bad.
Other people probably seeing that.
Here's the reason why.
Oh, yep.
There we
Busted.
go. There we go.
My radio check busted. Oh.
Yeah, we're good.
Testing 1 2 1 2.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're doing a recap of the first 3.5 things. So the third one was too much dependence on the owner.
Yeah.
What's the issue?
Oh man, Gary, you're gonna love this business. It's totally turnkey. Totally turnkey. Doesn't need me at all. I'm totally, don't need to. I don't even need to be here. In fact, my whole salary should be an add back. Whole salary, add back. Okay, well, cool. When was the last time that you took a vacation? Vacation? I can't leave this place. Fall apart. So I think it just goes back to, the reality is that most buyers want to, like, most, even if it's private equity and you're sticking around, as the owner, like the data at BGW, and I suspect Jack probably has very similar data. The exception is the person is still there after the initial contract term. Because usually what happens is, hey, Gary, love you, want you to be around, blah, blah, you're part of this transaction, rollover equity, you're going to get the second bite at the apple, blah, blah. And, someone like myself or Jack will say, well, you probably ought to get an employment contract, and they'll get one. Guess what? It's going to be for 1 year max.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Maybe there's going to be a couple little punitive clauses that are sitting in there. Yeah. I always find the irony of 1 year employment contract, but a 3-year non-compete, go figure on that. But, that doesn't seem very fair. But, Jack,
wait. It depends if you're the employer or employee. So you need to qualify that.
Yeah,
right?
no, I got you. Yeah. So I'm talking about, me as the seller, what am I going to get? A 3-year non-compete that I'm locked into, but a 1-year employment contract would be pretty typical. And I'm just, those are like their side are going to be, those are walk away terms, like no deal, so for the seller, they typically will cave on those points. But the reality is, the exception, I mean, it's less than 50% of the clients that we've had have been around
Yeah.
to even to go beyond the initial 1 year term of the employment contract, and it's less than 50% that even make it through the year.
Yeah.
So I think if you think about, well, how's that translate? Okay, well, first off, if rollover equity was a significant portion of your consideration, not getting that, meaning like now you're not in any control to influence it one way or the other. If your contract even has you get paid anything for it, upon separation. Secondly, if you were kind of nodding your head, but secretly you wanted to be out the door anyway, and you were good with it, but you have a crappy ass man, like place totally dependent on you. How do you get the freedom that you wanted?
Well, that's a great segue because it leads to sin number 4, lack of a strong management team.
Yeah. So I just had the opportunity to, so again, let's say that you can take vacations, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have that means that maybe it's not as dependent upon you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a great management team. You've just put some good controls in place, around stuff. So, well played. Does it mean you have a really great management team? Don't know yet, but I was just in Chicago and had the opportunity to hear Jim Collins speak. Good to great author. Punchline is, right people on the bus. So obviously he's a big fan of the people, side of the equation.
Yeah.
So again, you want to leave and you're trying to sell how great your people are, but how do you know that, it's tough. But I thought that Jim Collins had a good way of evaluating that I wanted to share. When you're just thinking through, okay, my trusted lieutenants, my management team, first off, who would I even say is the management team? And he had 3 criteria that I thought was awesome. And I'm like, wow, that's well done, sir. That is why you're a billionaire book publisher and I'm, sitting in the audience listening to you. And it was, one is their performance has an outsized influence on your success. Meaning like, man, if this person is good, it has like a multiplier effect, on the business, based on them being good at what they do. And the converse of that, which was number 2, is failure poses an outsized risk, meaning like, hey, if they're bad, could completely sink the ship. And, so you go back to, item number 1, have crap ass financial records. Well, and I actually have a CFO, like that would be an example of a crap ass CFO or a controller can pose an outsized risk. Maybe there's not a ton that they can do in terms of the positive performance, because they're looking backwards, but in terms of like completely screwing the pooch for you, yeah, outsized, versus like your HR director that really is just monitoring compliance, that may be on your leadership team, but if they don't do a great job, it's like not the end of the world. Whereas, hey, we're running out of money and nobody told me, and by the way, our financials are completely misstated. That's no bueno. And then 3, I thought this one was really good, is that it comes with a lot of hiring responsibilities. So, the people are doing a ton of hiring. So going back to business completely dependent on the owner, do I have an effective management team? If the owner says, no, I take vacations, I do blah, blah. Well, who does the hiring? I still do all the hiring. Yeah. Sir, the business is still dependent upon you then, because you haven't used the team for hiring. So those are really the three criteria. And the way Jim posed the question is like, just, if you're being honest with yourself, of the people that are currently doing those, because a lot of us have people who are in those roles, how would you rate them? Scale of 1 to 10. 1 is like, well, their heart appears to be beating, but that's about it. That's all I got. Versus 10 is like, couldn't live without them, couldn't ask for anything more. They're actually better at the job at it than I am. How would you rate your people? And I think, to me, that's a good evaluation test, because having an effective management team would mean that for the people that meet those three criteria, outsized impact on performance, outsized impact on failure, critical to making hiring decisions, if they're all, probably above 7, you can look yourself in the eye and say, I have effective management. If they're not, then you got work to do. And there's something that you're leaving on the table.
So a couple of thoughts related
go
to
ahead.
that. I was going to say is that, and we talk about this a lot, is doing, taking a moment, taking a step back and looking around you. And, there are several schools of thought in relation to coming to certain realizations, which is, oh, let's hire a consultant and come in and tell us what we can do better and what we're doing wrong, including, how our management is, our management team, and do we have the right people? However, I have seen how if you just ask your people around you, and if they're being honest with you, they will tell you. But you have to create that circle of trust where there's, judgment-free zone, no retaliation or anything else for people to speak their mind. And that can become very difficult, because if you're the owner, you're the CEO, you hold that person's fate in your hand. And it has to be truly, no retaliation for telling you, yeah, you know what, this person's good at sales and marketing, but they're also dealing with internal development of personnel, so employees. So they're doing HR and sales and marketing. And when the company was smaller, maybe that was okay. But as the company grows and you're doing that self-evaluation, you really need to say, okay, is this and there's nothing wrong with hiring consultants, because you should, I think, have the internal perspective of the people around you, but also have somebody on the outside looking into the glass, I think the glass jar. We've talked about glass jar before, okay. So looking in and saying, okay, this is what I see. And the funny thing is that, continuing the metaphor is, when you look through glass, many times the image that you see is distorted. So you're not going to get the full inside story necessarily from looking at the outside. So you have that perspective, then you have the internal perspective, and you combine the two together to see if you have the management team that you need, the personalities that you need. And it may be that, great person, great skill set, but maybe refocus them to do something different, maybe something that they were doing in the past, doing it well, and then something got bolted onto them, remove that thing that was bolted onto them 5 years ago. So, just be mindful of those two perspectives and take advantage of the people inside. But you got to have a circle of trust, or, that cone of silence, circle of trust. I could throw out all kinds of stuff that way, but.
And, just to talk about real quickly, just to remind everybody the importance of this point, not just this particular point, but like all 7 of these items. The reason that we bring them up is that, when I'm talking to Gary, who just sold his company, at the country club over a highball, and he's, telling me, oh man, I got a 9, 10 EBITDA multiple. No reason, that's standard out there today. Okay, you dig underneath the covers, and only one of 2 things could be true. I mean, because very rarely that, a buyer just woke up in the morning and said, I know what I want to do today. I want to radically overpay. for something relative to the market.
Yeah.
So it's one of two things is true. Either A, Gary was in like a subscription, recurring revenue,
Yeah.
low cost to deliver type business that's going to warrant that type of multiple, or was like a critical, vital, strategic bolt-on, that I absolutely needed. That it's like, yeah, I gave you a 9 because the accretive value to me is more like a 40.
Yeah.
That's scenario 1. Or scenario 2, I look like this, like I don't have these sins, or if I do have these sins, they're like, I'm only saying 1 Hail Mary. I'm not saying 40 Hail Marys and an Our Father. So I'm not Catholic. I didn't even know if I got that right, but that's, in theory, what my penance might have been had I gone to confession, at some point. So maybe a good practicing Catholic on the line can correct me with what the penance would be for one of these. But it basically, look, I mean, don't take what Gary says about getting his 9 or 10 multiple with like okay, got it. I mean, it's serious. Only one of two things can be true. Either A, super specific, or B, I had an extremely well-run company. There's not an option 3. There's just not.
Nay. It could be that he's lying.
Oh yeah, it could be he's lying.
So, not that we've ever had anybody exaggerate at the country club about this or that.
Yeah,
But
that's right. That was fifth highball multiple, not 1 highball multiple.
But so I want to just double down on one thing on this management team thing. So yes, it's hard to read the label when you're inside the jar. Get an outside perspective, Jack. 2, yes, right on. You've got to have internal validation. But here's the thing that I've seen like entrepreneurs really, really, really struggle with, which is, and I'll use an example. This one guy was 28 million top line, and within a couple of years he was at 89 million. And young guy in his early 30s, and he had literally started doing what became this company when he was 11 years old. Crazy. But he had a bunch of his high school buddies that were in seats of power on his 10-person management team. And if you really got honest about the capabilities within those people, the company had leapfrogged past all of them, and even the CEO, quite frankly. So the weakest area and the area that they were most vulnerable in was in the CFO role, CFO and kind of COO role. They had a VP of finance that was in way over their heads. I mean, it was literally taking 3 months to close the month-end books, and it should take a 5 to 7 day turn on that. So all the data was so late that they were rolling down Highway 7, I-77 at 90 miles an hour with the windshield painted black. They could not see where they were going. And so that was the first and most critical one. But it's really hard when you are, you had somebody that was there on the journey with you from when you were in a trailer and making it happen to now all of a sudden you've got a palatial office and all these things going. You want to reward loyalty, but you will do yourself and them a favor by just getting them in their sweet spot, and there's a well-known billion-dollar company in town that one of the founders was in that exact same space. So the CEO founder had to keep moving one of the founders into sweet spot that it could look like demotion, quite frankly. It could look like a demotion, but that other founder had enough high enough EQ that person could deal with it because they were thriving. They were in their unique sweet spot. So, and they didn't really want to be in corporate America, billion-dollar company doing a bunch of bureaucratic paper pushing. And this guy is wildly creative, they allowed him, and so they still paid him quite well, but allowed him to do his, be in his thrive zone. So I would just say it's going to be really hard. And I think that's one of the most emotional things that we've seen with our clients is when they are facing that harsh reality. Oh, but what do I do with Timmy, whatever.
Yeah, and so that's interesting because Jim Collins actually addressed that, and he just said, okay, kind of survey. This is 500 companies or 500 people that were represented. It was probably about 250 some odd companies. How many of you take a replace strategy, meaning, not going to work, let's get you out of here, versus a training development strategy, and the room was pretty evenly split 50-50, and Collins said, yeah, that's actually pretty representative of what he sees out there. And he said there's no there's no definitive correlation between either strategy, other than to say, if you're going to take the training and development route, you actually need to do the training and development, versus the, oh man, hopefully that'll get better scenario. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to number 5. So we've made it past 3.5. We made it through 4.
Yeah.
What's number 5?
Customer concentration. So I'm clicking on all cylinders and great business, man, killing it, great margins, blah, blah. And I even got a contract, Jack. I got a contract. Well, who's your customer? Who's your biggest customer? Well, I only got one, and it's Walmart. How's that go over, Jack?
Congratulations, and good luck in keeping that contract or keeping it as is, because Walmart are very good negotiators.
Oh,
my brother-in-law worked for Johnson & Johnson and was in Arkansas because he was the account rep for them for Walmart. And so I have, I know stories. And so yes, that concentration, absolutely. But continue on, because we're going to say the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really, in other words, it's a killer. Like, there's an open question on whether or not your business will even sell, at that point. But if it does, it's going to be hard for any, even with, hey, can we bridge the gap with an earnout, man? Customer concentration, that's a real killer. So a lot of people ask, well, what should I be shooting for? And that a good rule of thumb is nobody's bigger than 25%.
Yeah.
Kind of no matter what industry you are, nobody's bigger than 25%, because then if somebody leaves, it's not catastrophic. So, and what can end up happening is, like, you get excited, hey, you've got a high growth rate, and all of a sudden it's like, I had great diversification and now I don't. I mean, I've got a client now that is in that boat. It's like, used to have great diversification and has grown like a weed, but now he's got terrible diversification because, client number 1 is 50% of the revenue. That's a Fortune, 100 company with crappy ass freaking payment terms and a dictatorial style in terms of gross margins. Like, dude, you got to fix this, so.
And I'm going to compound that problem by saying, okay, the lack of diversification or customer concentration, not just your own, but if you are concentrating on one customer and that customer is concentrating their customer concentration. Now, this is way out of your control, but you just need to be mindful of it. So that way, if it's very linear, and it may be that, okay, you no longer have a good customer because your customer's customer is now having issues because they didn't diversify themselves. So, and obviously talking about maybe you manufacture a part that goes into something else that's sold to a particular customer. So that's the kind of thinking or the scenario, but, just be aware of where your stuff is going or the services that you are providing that maybe are bolted onto or part of a much larger service that's being provided, who is that being provided to? So the diversification of your customers, essentially, you need to pay attention to as well.
When I was in private equity, that was one of the first things that we looked at, which was customer concentration. And we invested in a company, and I'll use the name because it's public knowledge, and the guy's been on our on our podcast, and the Anything But Typical podcast. But Roger Braswell, before I had moved back to Charlotte, we invested in his company called Compact Power. Love Roger, loved his company. So they were doing all the trailerable stuff that you see in a Home Depot parking lot, for rentals, trenchers, backhoes, scissor lifts, all that kind of stuff. But concentration was extremely high with Home Depot, and we were like, man, and we kept pounding on him like, Roger, you've got to diversify. Just from a risk perspective, from our standpoint. Well, this is the one example that I can think of where it actually worked out for him. So we went through the 08-09 downturn, and man, he navigated so he actually he bought a company called Mertz, where they were doing their own manufacturing of trenchers, backhoes, that kind of stuff. They had to liquidate that or shed it during the downturn, because he was just doing everything to navigate and miss the rocks, and he did an extremely good job. But Home Depot ended up buying them. So this was one of those deals, and it was, I think, a $265 million purchase. I mean, it was a big purchase, and he's now on their board, which, well, that worked out great for him, and it worked out great for everybody that had invested in him. And we were we were one of many that had invested in him. So in that case, it worked, but it was a dangerous gamble in some ways. And, what were the multiples? I don't know. Probably not as high as if he had less of that, but a strategic acquisition, that can happen, but people that are banking on that's a very dangerous position. I've seen it backfire more than it's actually worked. So that's a really good one. So customer concentration, kind of like the concentration risk that we had with the owner, same sort of the thing. What's number 6?
So just lack of process, meaning like you got great execution, but it's based on tribal knowledge and employee longevity. Like I can't really point to like, hey, that's that's how we do stuff, around here. It's more like, well, Jack's the guy. Jack's been here for 20 years. Nobody better than Jack, at this business. It's like, okay, well, what if Jack leaves? We'd be screwed.
Yeah.
Because you're being honest.
Yeah.
You're trying to talk about how great your team is, and how you've done a great job, like great management, great diversification, loyal employees, it's all like nothing. It's all good here. Well, what happens if Jack leaves? I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Because you got nothing written down. It's all based on tribal knowledge. So generally speaking, what companies want to be able to, what buyers want to be able to see, it's like, again, going back to, no buyer ever decided to buy, overpay for a company, unless very rarely, but unless it was for specific reasons, like they made a mistake and they way overpaid. I think it's also equally true that no buyer ever said, hey, Gary, we totally want to buy you, and we totally are willing to pay you a premium, and we're basing that on forecasts that call for a decline or no growth.
Right.
Or inflationary style growth. That sounds great for us. No, I mean, they're basically looking to double or triple your size.
Yeah.
So they can get a good return on the flip. Well, the only way that they can do, like, if you just thought about this today, right? Like you've had pretty good growth, you're double digits, man. You might even be, your double digits might even start with a 2 or a 3. if I all of a sudden said, Gary, I'm going to need you to double your company size in 3 years, because that's what they're looking for. You're like, well, holy crap. I mean, I'm at 100 employees now. I have to hire 200 then in the next 3 years. How I'm going to have to onboard, twice as many, like, it's just a lot, and if you don't have, something that's scalable meaning like you put a person in, it doesn't take very long for them to come up to speed and then produce a predictable result. That's kind of the definition of a scalable process. It doesn't mean that it has to be leverageable. It needs to be scalable in the sense of like, whether I do 1 or I do 20, this thing doesn't break down, because nobody's going to buy you without planning on, double digit at a minimum, kind of double digit growth. And even if you've had that, their double digit's going to be double whatever your double digit was, because that's the only way they're going to be able to make the deal work. So they're looking for, hey, can we really scale this company based on the processes? So what then happens? It's like Gary says, oh, I got great processes, cool, show me the manual.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
if I can even do that.
Yeah.
Well, it's so a couple thoughts on that. And Gary, I think you saw a question came in, but so what you're talking about really is the blueprint, the DNA of moving forward through the onboarding and moving forward with the business itself. And so in the franchise context, that's called an operations manual. And I've said before that I have talked potential prospect emerging franchisors out of becoming franchisors because they weren't ready yet. They didn't have that process down. I would also say that it's not just about people, it's about the infrastructure of your companies. And I'll give you an example that came up recently, which is, and you guys were talking about the person who leaves, and what happens when Jack leaves the company. Well, if Jack, now I'm speaking in third person like Seinfeld, if Jack were one of those people who saved his work on his hard drive, or didn't follow process and procedure to put stuff where it's supposed to go, like into our document management system, then that's going to be a problem when someone leaves. And we've experienced that as soon as I see that happening or find out that's happening, I go to that person and like, you are not leaving this office until all your stuff is where it's supposed to be. And nothing against the person. It's just, okay, first of all, what happens if your hard drive crashes? It's like, okay, that's a problem. But also just for continuity, no one is so invaluable or should not be made to be or put in a position of being so valuable that if you lose them, you're SOL. You need to put processes and procedures to protect your assets, essentially. And so, we focus on the process and the blueprints and everything else, but also the infrastructure to protect that and to implement those processes and procedures needs to be there as well.
Yeah, that's good. Bruce, you always come up with really good questions. So here's the scenario and question. Have you seen cases where an outsider is hired as the change catalyst, but then they become enamored with their new peers and processes, so they become a blockage to change, since the other old timers feel vindicated that no change is really necessary? Ooh, I have never seen that one. Have you guys seen that one?
I have a flavor of it. If you want to, the second part of his question is how far do you go to protect the lone wolf new member of the management team that I think what you're saying, Bruce, that you brought on to be that.
Yeah, that's right.
That change catalyst. I think so what I've seen more often than not with the like if you kind of look at some of the words you use there, enamored, vindicated, what really happened is, let's say that I'm the old timer and Gary's the new member of the management team, right? That's
like that
hey,
role reversal.
Jack brought in Gary to come be the change management, right? And I'm the old timer, right? So Gary, Gary's doing his thing. He's got his 90-day, evaluation to get the lay of the land. And, I freaking snowball him. Because I'm never going to interview as well. Like I'm never going to interview as well as like the day that you came and talked to me about what kind of job I do. I gave you like every shining example of how amazing that I am. And I never told you about a single, because how can I have a failure, man? I've been here for 20 years. Of course I know what I'm doing. So I think I use that as an example because I have seen that example quite a bit. And what I think what happens is that, kind of Gary gets a little bit snowballed because he doesn't do enough digging. And what the digging would find would be, well, that's great, Adam. Does that happen 100% of the time? Oh, no. Like that only happened 20. So I know what to do, but I only do it 25% of the time, or maybe I do it 80% of the time. Well, let's go talk to Timmy, who's in the same job as you. Timmy, tell me more about, I don't do it Adam's way. This way is stupid, and maybe Timmy has a better result or maybe has a worse result than I have. So I think the reality of what I've seen when an outside third party is brought in as a change agent, I think 1 time out of 10, the change agent actually has such an earth-shattering idea that it's like, holy crap, we would have never thought of that in a million years had you not been here. I think 9 times out of 10, the team already had the answers. They're just not doing it. Yeah. And they got validated. Yeah. And what the change agent really needs to do is to say, well, Gary, I mean, you kind of know the secret to this thing is diet and exercise. Of course, you know that, jackass, but you're not doing it. Like, you got any plans, any conceivable plan, to actually put that in action, anytime. Yeah. Anytime here soon, has been more the example, even within BGW. I mean, we spent a lot of money on the gurus in the CPA business at client service processes, like how you service a client. And I think Gary and I could probably sit here with a very straight face and say that what we got out of them were a couple little nuggets. Yeah. A couple little ideas of operational things that we had thought of that they helped us with operations wise, but it's like we had 85% of the answer. Yeah, they just are helping. They helped us get over the other 15% hurdle. So I mean, yeah. so I could have sat back in my role and said, "Told you, third party just came in and validated every idea this guy has ever had." But I couldn't look at us organizationally with a straight face and say, and we do every single one of my ideas every time, 100% of the time across the board. That'd be bullshit. Yeah. Sorry about my language. I didn't do very well with my no swearing policy.
So I'm laughing because I was late to the game late to the read of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and I had wanted to read it, but then it was mentioned maybe a couple of weeks ago, and so I'm actually listening to it at 1.4x in my car through Audible. But I mean, and it's really interesting because there's one narrator, and he has interpreted the personalities of this fictional team, right? And so, the accents and everything else. So you can really get into it. The story, I got sucked into the story, but it is, okay, you bring the agent of change in, and how do you navigate through the personalities, and how do you navigate through the ideas that were already there to say, okay, yes, or if, things were maybe need to be tweaked, or maybe were bad ideas. You have all those variations. And I would say that here's how, if you have not experienced bringing in consultants to be a change agent for your company, here's how those typically go down, which is the reporting back. The initial report is, we see how wonderfully you've implemented plan A and initiative B, and kudos to you for doing all these wonderful things. And so you're on the right track. But and the ones that are being honest with you will say, but let's focus on these things and not sugarcoat it. You usually will get the sugarcoating that, okay, here is the report that says these are things you should do. And to Adam's point, many of those things on the list are things that were already in the list, mental lists of people that were there already, or the person who was in charge. Yes, there will be some novel ideas, but when you peel back the layers, are they really novel, or are they just variations of things that you already knew? So, and again, not to say that there aren't novel ideas that come out, because again, you have an outsider reading the label, an outsider looking inward. But, so it is a method of validation of things you already knew, and you will get some nuggets of what you don't know. So I don't want to offend any business consultants that are out there listening or watching, but that's how it goes down. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need an outsider to come in and say, these are the things. And as much as, if you're the one in charge who has had these ideas but hasn't been successful in implementing them, it's very hard not to say, I told you so. But don't say I told you so, because that will not be good for team building.
No, it does.
That's true.
And I think, to put a bow on what Jack just said, I mean, if you think about like, okay, well, I'm going to spend $100,000 on a consulting company and tell me what I already know. I mean, I think a good outside consultant, the other thing they help you do is like, yeah, they didn't give you 10 new ideas, because I mean, you already had the 10 ideas, but you didn't know the order to implement them. You didn't know which two were going to give you kind of the Pareto, 80% lift for 20% of the effort, or maybe even you did, but you weren't taking the time to actually get the team together, in a room to then all agree on that kind of stuff. So that there's a lot of value in, they helped you with the order, in the sequence, in terms of what to do.
Yeah, the first guy that we brought in on my first turnaround a long time ago at 28 years of age, he was $10,000 a day plus expenses, and you paid him up front. So there was no, so 23 grand in today's money. But what I would say, hands down, he helped us get clarity, courage, and confidence to where we were able to move faster. And occasionally we got a couple nuggets, but it was well worth the money, because we were able to shorten cycle time and we moved with decisiveness. And there's something about being able to do that. And, I'm going to just wrap this one up. Bruce, I've been hired as a change agent more than once. And I've seen two kinds of results. One was where I was brought in by the founder of a company, and he was writing $2 million checks personally, and his other partner was writing $2 million checks personally, keep the doors open. And I came in, and so they put me on the management team and said, this is what we want. Well, the management team, not all of them were embracing me, especially one of the guys that I was supposed to replace, but also VP of operations was really not embracing me, because I was threatening their turf. I didn't want to be VP of operations, but I was exposing. He was afraid I was going to be exposing stuff, which I did, and so that's a very dangerous position to be in. And the fact that they brought me in on the management team, terrifying. But the founder made it very clear to everybody on that management team, I'm putting some markers on this guy. And I actually had active saboteurs trying to torpedo some of the stuff that we did. Fortunately, he put a kibosh on that for the most part. And we were able to do it. And it was a massive turnaround. It took us 2 years to do it, but it was a massive turnaround. Compare and contrast that with another one that had done that multiple times, and I was just the new shiny object guy in the litany of people, put on management team again. Initially, that management team resisted me because, oh, Gary's just the new flavor of the day for this CEO. But we ended up forging relationships, and we brought in another guy after I was brought in on the inside, because I still felt like we needed to have an outside perspective. That guy was 20 grand a month, which was crazy. He was really, really good, but he fired us because the CEO was uncoachable, and he had to be the smartest guy in the room. And that company went from 140 people to 14 within 2 years. Well, it still comes down to you, the owner, the management. It still comes down to you navigating that. It's not like you're going to just put it on autopilot and see how it comes, because it's going to create friction and change. So that was a couple really good questions, Bruce. Hopefully we've given you some good fodder for what you were looking for. So let's keep rocking and rolling. So number 7.
Just lack of kind of a business plan around, my business period, but also how to go into other markets. So, if I use just BGW as an example, I like to think we're a pretty good business. We could be attractive to an outside buyer. Decent growth rate, got some good processes, got some good people, hopefully not dependent upon me.
No,
So
pretty good.
So we got good things, right? But then if I were to get asked the question from the potential buyer, hey, what are y'all doing about artificial intelligence? And I have no answer. Hey, what are you guys doing about the fact that compliance tax returns are going to be done by computers in a couple of years? I got no answer. Hey, you got a pretty good model, how would you expand it? I got no answer.
Yeah.
I don't have a business plan. I don't, I can't credibly say that I have a business plan. So guess what? The buyer is going to have to create that, right? Versus scenario 2, which is I have answers for all those questions, and all I need, sir, is your capital to go execute it.
Yeah.
Much higher premium. Much higher premium.
And you got to be careful how you sell that. It's confidence, but not arrogance, right? And so, yes, absolutely. And so, but yeah, it's not having a business plan. I hesitate to say this, but since I'm half Latino, I'm allowed to. But the mañana syndrome, tomorrow. I'll get to it tomorrow. Half Italian too, so I don't know what the word for tomorrow is in Italian, but
probably
it's
the same.
Probably close to it. Yeah.
Mañana.
Yes. But it. See. But you get bugged. You are focused on your business. You're focused on what's in front of you. You're focused on sales. You're focused on personnel issues, HR issues, and it's difficult too. And just even thinking about taking a pause to put together a business plan is painful, psychologically, mentally. But you got to do it. You got to do it. I don't like doing it, but I know that I have to, because I have a responsibility to myself, to the people that I work with, to my own family, to make sure that, there is a plan moving forward in 2024, and not just because it'd be easy just to sit back and say, all right, well, the firm has a good reputation. I've been in this community for 35 years. I'll just sit back and wait till it happens. But not deal with AI. I mean, that's a huge issue in the legal field as to, okay, first of all, the regulation of it, and even the use of it internally. And there have been attorneys, not here in our firm, but attorneys in this country who have relied upon, young attorneys who relied upon AI to put together a brief, and it was wrong. I mean, factually incorrect, and had a judge call them out on it. So, all those things. But you're right. If you don't have the answers, or you think that you can, you are the extrovert that can bluff your way through that, even the most confident white liars are not going to get through that, because there's just too many metrics that would go into, once you're getting into due diligence, that would expose that you're not prepared. You haven't spent the money. You don't have written materials that express what you're going to do moving forward. Are you going to expand? Are you going to go in a certain direction with marketing? Are you going to look into a new line of business, or providing new services? How are your services going to evolve over the course of time? Are you going to become the Blockbuster of videos? And I still have my Blockbuster card somewhere in storage. So and the original Blockbuster, I think, was in Matthews, and I drive by there. I think it's a medical building now. So anyway, but think about those things. You have to be forward looking, and so please do that.
Hey, so on the Blockbuster theme, what was the industry that founder had made their money in before video? Anybody know?
That sounds like a Starbucks coffee card, if somebody can do it in 10 seconds.
It could be.
Yes.
I'll give you a hint. The guy's name was Wayne Huizinga. Chicago.
That sounds like a made up name.
Oh,
Like
no.
from Seinfeld. That sounds like a Seinfeld made up name.
He owns the Dolphins. Waste Management.
That's right.
Yep.
He got out of Blockbuster at the right time. So Bruce, hopefully we gave you what you were looking for. He said good personal experiences and observational comments, final comments on the CEO willingness to learn and hear the music rather than remaining out of touch. Yeah, I mean, you as a leader, as you go, so does the rest of the company. And, we've seen great examples and we've seen train wrecks. And the one thing that I will say on number 7, because I'm from Kansas, he's from Oklahoma, keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Start with something that is actionable, and don't think about like, oh gosh, I've got to have this Harvard business case review, like the document. That's great, I suppose. But if your people can't follow it, and if it's not clear and concise, I think that's one of the things that I really admire about a lot of the leaders that we get to work with. They keep it kind of simple. And Dave Zerfoss is a great example. If you want to listen to a guy that kept it simple, and he took his, what was it, 100 million to $1 billion?
Yep.
And he's his Vistage chair. He's on the Anything But Typical podcast, so look it up. Dave Zerfoss's episode is really interesting, but he just keeps it Midwestern simple, and the results were astronomical. So
my tangential comment to that is, when you keep it simple, keep it so that people can understand it and don't have to translate. And so you may recall that my in-law side of the family is from Kansas, from McPherson. Specifically.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so before GPS, when we go out there and visit, and actually I've done wheat farming and driven a combine with the driver next to me, so I was actually sitting in the cockpit. But
yeah, there's a difference.
Unsynchronized transmission trucks to bring the wheat to the barn to get weighed. However, my point is that please don't tell me that I need to drive east to the southwest 40 acres of this property when it's nighttime, because I have no idea which way is east. I have no idea which is the southwest.
Everything
40
runs north and south and east and west in Kansas, though.
Yes,
man.
but it's like without the sun, I'm like, I don't know. In a compass, I'm like, I don't know. Just tell me, okay, go straight, turn left here. What's the name of the road? Kind of thing. So my point is that make it so that people don't have to have a translation matrix in order to get to the destination, essentially.
Yeah, that's good. You know, go left where the Prouty barn used to be.
That's right.
Oh man. Well, we're hitting that at the 12 o'clock hour. I just heard Adam's stomach rumbling, so I knew that that's what the time was. So no, I'm kidding. So next week we'll see what we're gonna go into. If anybody has any ideas of something that's really burning on your mind, hit me. GFrey, Frey at trustbgw.com, and we'll take that into consideration. But thank you for spending time with us on week 180. Next week, guess what that is? 181. There we go. So Jack, I'm so glad that you were able to make it through Charlotte traffic. Thank you for joining us as always. And anybody that wants this ebook, if you have not gotten this, that Adam wrote on tripling the value of your company, send me an email, gfrey at trustbgw.com. I'll make sure you get it. And I didn't put it up in the chat today. I should have. I can do it next week, but it's worth reading, and we've covered, you know, all of those points here in the last 2 episodes. So anything else, Jack, before we go?
All good. Thank you. I guess we'll
All
continue
right.
onward about it next
All
time.
right. Thanks so much. See you guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.